Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, the show that gives you a virtual seat at the bar for the real conversations that happen between entrepreneurs. I'm interviewing all kinds of business owners, from those just a few years into freelancing to CEOs helming 9-figure companies. If you've ever worried that everyone else just seems to get it and you're missing something or messing things up, this show is for you. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and let's get to it. And welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. With me today is my good friend, Adela Hussain. Say hi.
Hello, Angie. Greetings from London, where it's not raining right now.
Oh, lucky. Greetings from Texas, where it's already hot and spring has sprung. We're recording this early in March of 2024, and I am excited. So before I go down the weather rabbit hole, tell us a little bit more about your business and what you do.
Hello, everyone. My name is Adela Hussain. As you can hear, I'm British, so I've got a very strong British accent. I help experts play bigger in their business and become true thought leaders by getting media coverage, and to get media coverage to attract clients, credibility, and reach. So I have a media mastery method. I run a media mastermind where over 12 months, I introduce you to 24 media professionals to help you land media features.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so awesome. And I love this. I've been on a media journey in the past too. Actually, I think you and I talked about this because I had an article, a very personal article appear in Huffington Post last year. And I can always tell when they send it out because I get like a fresh influx of like followers and various channels, message requests going, I just saw your article on Huffington Post. I'm like, wow, that came out in November, and it keeps going after you initially put it out there, which is really awesome.
I love that. Yeah. I love it. I love it when you get that flurry of interest. And because a lot of journalists, Angie, and this may have happened to you, they don't actually send you an email letting you know the article has come out. So you just suddenly see this flurry of interest. And so you go down a little bit of a detective journey, trying to figure out why. And then you realize an article's being released. And it's really exciting when you suddenly get that impact on your business.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because I didn't know when I pitched it, but I worked with somebody who's in a similar space to you. I know you specialize in working with like wellness professionals. This person specializes in working with experts. And I just kind of told her, I need some ideas pulled out of my head. I have no idea what is special or interesting. And I don't mean that in a derogatory, oh, I'm depressed sense, which if you're depressed, sending you all the love. But we're not objective when it comes to evaluating what rocks about us, which is why I love what you do. And when I got on a call with this woman, I'm like, well, this is what all has happened. This is my goal. I'm about to release a book. I have this podcast. These are the things I talk about. These are the people I'm passionate about. I've had a couple setbacks. And she does something that I do with my clients. Ooh, tell me more about that. And it's like, well, right as I was quitting my job to start the podcast, I had this experience with an ex-boyfriend that unexpectedly dumped me. And she was like, that would make a great essay for the Huffington Post personal section. Here's the editor. Here's how you frame that. Away you go. And I was like, that's nice. That's so lovely when somebody can point out that's a fascinating story. Here's where to put it.
I love it. I love it. Exactly. I mean, I think it's really, I think what you did there was absolutely what a lot of experts should do, which is you shouldn't brainstorm ideas for the media in isolation. You sit there with a blank screen thinking, what am I going to pitch the media today? Which is why inside my media mastermind, I bring the journalist in there with you on hot seats to brainstorm story ideas. And the best story ideas come just through the art of conversation. I mean,
yes.
One of my clients, Brenda Winkle, last year, it was actually my favorite headline last year, was she, in her hot seat with a journalist, she just said, and she wasn't pitching it. She just said, oh, we were talking about menopause. And she said, I found out I was in menopause on email. And then she carried on the conversation. And the journalist had to stop her and say, hang on a minute, that's a headline. And before you know it, she got it commissioned there in that hot seat with the editor of a publication here in the UK. And it became a 2-page article that she wrote in her own words. So I absolutely agree with you. You can't brainstorm by yourself. You do it with someone else. And the stories just emerge in the conversation.
Yeah, but I mean, everything that you're saying, I think, is gold. And I'm going to unpack it a little bit for folks. Like when you are brainstorming, and we're not saying that you can't brainstorm by yourself, but we're saying that the gold comes out in the conversations. When you're not thinking about it, you're articulating on the fly, you're tapping into your passions, your emotions, whether they're positive or negative. That's when you say things that are absolute gold, and somebody who's listening can reflect that back to you and say, oh, wow, that thing that you just said, that was really awesome. I found out I was on menopause, or I was experiencing menopause through email. Fantastic. Tell me more about that. Like, I'm curious now. Whereas when you sit, and this is a professional writer of over 13 years here saying, when I sit down and I brainstorm articles or ideas or content, I tend to go serious mode, like Angie personality, whoop, yeet out the window. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to 5 reasons why. Like I get so in my head and think everything has to be Pulitzer worthy or, super serious to paint me as an expert that I wind up inadvertently stripping out any kind of personality. I actually did have a friend not too long ago. Actually, it was like a couple years ago. He's like, social media Angie and email Angie are 2 different people. Are you aware of this? And I was like,
I love that that
ooh.
person reflected that back to you, because that is, they say you should write as you speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where the gold is. And it's interesting because when I deal with a lot of these prestigious editors of publications, they say things to me like, we write about the locker room conversations,
Mm-hmm.
Bustle in New York. They specifically say we write about the bar, the bar stool conversations, like the conversations you're going to have with a girlfriend over a Cosmopolitan in a bar, or the locker room conversations with someone else. And I think that's such a great little analogy to think about what is the story that people want to hear right now. What's the unsaid story? And often the bar stool conversation and the locker room conversations are kind of done slightly privately, in quite intimate moments. So for people, and that's where the story gold is.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's even we're kind of meta now, but that's the premise behind this show. And that's actually what happened to me, was that I was in the growth stages of that painful, messy stage where you're like, I am just messing everything up. Why even bother? I don't know what I'm doing here. Those people on stage are golden children that have all of their shit figured out. I am hopelessly over here messing up and will never be on that stage, right? And then I happened to overhear at the bar one of the speakers talking about getting hit with a lawsuit while losing their biggest client, not sure, like devastated, don't know what he's going to do. And then you and I were at a mastermind last week where somebody talked about something similar. Here's a picture of me on stage presenting in front of like 200 people, and you don't know what's happening in the background, which is, and that's not my story to share. That's his story to share. But he basically talked about a devastating personal experience that was happening at the same time. And like, you don't know what's happening in those stories. But if you can hear it at the bar stool, like these conversations, the reality of what's happening, it gives you a little hope. It gives you a little bit more. We're humans in business. We're not perfect robots in business.
Yes, 100%. And this is what I say to so many people about pitching into the media. You don't need to be, typically I hear from so many talented experts, oh, I'm not ready for the media. I need to be a lot bigger for the media, or I need to have my perfect business for the media. And that's when I will pitch the media. And actually, and it's a conversation I have all the time with people, is that journalists and editors, they're not looking for perfect people to put into their publication. They actually want real, relatable stories from ordinary humans. So, anyone that's going on a hero's journey is always of interest to any journalist or any editor or any TV producer, because that's what makes you a relatable expert, right? It's boring to look at perfect people, and it's almost, we can end up being a little bit slightly cynical towards them.
Yes.
But if someone's gone through the challenges and the difficulties, that hero's journey, that's when we can relate to them.
So glad that you said that, because I've encountered that a couple of times with people they've idly said in conversation to me, oh, I want to come on your podcast, but I'm not ready yet. I need to hit X level. My own mom said that to me right before telling me a story about, so she's got a baking business and she goes to local festivals as a cottage baker and sells her goods. And somebody who was in the game for 6 months to my mom's 3 years came up and asked her for advice, like, how are you doing this? And my mom spouting off ideas, right? She doesn't have a multi-million-dollar business, but she was able to help somebody at the 6 month level with her 3 years of experience. So that's one. Like I always tell people, where you're at is where you're at, and your experience is valid, and you have enough experience to help somebody. Right.
Yes.
And then the other part of that is, one of my mentors told me there's such a thing as an accidental expert. You don't necessarily have to climb 20 years through the corporate ladder and then, go out on your own or anything like that to be an expert. The example that he used hit home for me too, because, like, say you have a particularly nasty, bitter divorce that happens, right? And now somebody else who's going through the same thing knows that you went through this experience and says, I'm lost. I don't know what to do. Do you have any advice for me? Now you're their expert. You didn't set out to carve a career out of being, the person that is the Sherpa for for brutal divorces or anything like that. But some of these things just happen, and you become the person that people know. So, like, let's just set on fire this notion that you have to have credentials out the wazoo and be climbing a ladder and 25 years of experience and all these awards and accolades before you get to tell your story. It's bullshit.
100%, Angie. And it's interesting. I love this phrase, accidental expert, because I think actually I fall into that category. I was, if you look at part of my CV, I look like, well, I was a deep expert I come from a very corporate background. I used to work at Accenture on $469 million mergers and acquisitions, and was for 17 years in a very deep corporate space with very prestigious clients and traveling around the world. But then I quit that to become a fashion entrepreneur. So my background is I come from a fashion background, and I always wanted to have my own business. I set up a fashion business, but what was so interesting was that when I would walk into places with journalists and editors, I was deeply intimidated because, well, frankly, I didn't see any journalists or editors who looked like me. They were all white, blonde, Samantha Jones types. And I just couldn't relate to them. And I kept hiring publicists who weren't very good at telling my story. And I thought, why am I hiring, spending all this money on someone else telling my story when I could tell my story better than them? And as soon as I started telling my story, I got into 14 publications in 12 months. And it started to get awards. And I was in Cosmopolitan as one of the top 10 female founders of the year. And all these things started to happen. And I really noticed just the power of media on my business and what impact that had and how relationships would shift. Initially people were ignoring me, and then they would start ending up in my DMs when I get these big features. And so when I ended that business and I was wondering what to do, entrepreneurs in the online coaching space said, you were so good at getting in the media, you should teach other people how to do it without hiring an expensive publicist. So, I love the fact that you mentioned accidental expert, because I am an accidental expert. And now the interesting thing is I'm getting my clients faster media results than a publicist would. And so many publicists are like, how are you doing it? And I've cracked the code,
You've solved the problem that you experienced when you were first trying to get media. And I love the fact that you brought up, you were doing the traditional things, the prescribed things, the should, which, my best friend and I are fond of saying, don't should on yourself. Stop it. But, and that's not to denigrate anything that publicists or media, like, you're all doing your jobs, right? And appreciation, right? If you don't click with the person that you're trying to pitch, then you're missing the most special, most interesting stories. And so, to tie all of this back together, what you were talking about was I did the traditional PR route. I hired the publicists, and it wasn't happening for me. They didn't look like me. They didn't understand where I'm coming from. But then I start telling my story, and suddenly the energy shifted, and people are coming back around to me where they were ignoring me before. So, I guess what I'm trying to say in all of that is, if you are doing everything that you quote unquote should be doing and you're not getting the results, maybe you're a little bit in your head and being more complicated than you need to be. And you should just lean into being yourself, because you are the secret sauce in your business.
100%. And I think, people can often feel like intimidated when they're meeting someone who can help amplify their
Yes.
work. And they feel that they're in this power dynamic of, oh, I've got to impress this top expert, this podcaster, or this journalist or editor. And so I just never ever forget the day where I walked into Hearst in London and just walked into this room. I just felt so intimidated. And this is coming from me, a woman who was so used to dealing with some of the most high profile CEOs
Hmm.
in very aggressive investment banks. And I never had a problem dealing with white men in quite hostile environments. But put me in a room of Samantha Jones, and I started to crumble. So this is where anyone who feels like networking with anyone is a bit icky. It's
Hmm.
just completely. When I developed my model for how to help experts get in the media, I was just like, right, I'm just going to give you the 24 journalists on a platter over a year,
Yeah.
and you go into the safe space of a Zoom call. You don't have to hold your elbows out to get time to speak to someone in a room.
Yeah.
You have a dedicated hot seat, and that is your hot seat, and no one else can cut into it. So it's
Hmm.
all those things I found
Oh
as an
yeah.
expert pitching in 3D in real time, all that intimidation. That was what we used to develop this second business, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so interesting is that if you're feeling like something's not working, ask yourself, how can I fix it? How can I make
Yeah.
it better for other people? What
And
can I do?
could this be easier? Like the answer is not
Yes.
always more, better, different, new skills. Sometimes it's scaling back all of the noise and the complexity. I think that ties back perfectly to what we were talking about earlier. You mentioned got to impress the hosts. When you're sitting there in a vacuum trying to come up with topics, like you're trying to be impressive and you're trying to get into attention. Whereas when you're just being yourself, that's actually what gets attention. And that's fine. I mean, people don't see the behind the scenes of me producing this show, right? But there's a lot of conversations, a lot of dialogue that happens between me and potential guests beforehand. And the ones that just like they lay down the thud of all of their accomplishments,
Yes.
they don't get on the show, guys. I'm not
Yeah.
interested in talking about all of your awards and all of your accolades and your accomplishments. I mean, I am, but also I want to hear about how you got there because I'm sick and tired of the hockey stick growth story that we are all spoon fed from everybody out there. Like, that's not the overnight success story. Doesn't happen. I mean, there are overnight viral sensations that are accidental experts in this, right? But for the most of us, it's going to be several years of a steady slog before we get our first big break. And
Yes.
I'm not interested in hearing the magic. I want to hear about
Yes.
you.
Exactly, exactly. And this is the same for the media, right? People think they need to have some glossy story, and actually, it's the challenge, the stories that do really well in the media, the ones where someone really has worked through something and discovered a way to improve their life, or the learning from going through a really traumatic situation. There's always some gold there for someone else to learn from, to apply to their own life. So don't feel that. I mean, one of my journalists was so direct. And am I allowed to swear on this podcast? I don't know.
Absolutely.
She
Absolutely.
said, no one gives a shit about your business. Um, so
It's true.
anyone, and this is what I'm seeing, right? Any expert who is putting their business out there as part of the pitch will never, ever get that featured in the media. What journalists and editors are looking for, particularly the prestigious ones, they're looking for, what's the story right now, right? What's happening in the world right now? And how can you help, contribute to that story? How can you help people working through whatever's happening in the world right now? And how can you move that story on to the next conversation and the next conversation
Mm-hmm.
and tap
Absolutely,
into the
guys.
solution?
How often do you remember all of the steps in X ways to Y or Z? 5 ways to improve your, like, nobody remembers that shit. I'm just like, I have to go look it up to remember what the hell you were talking about. And that's not to say it's not useful information, but it doesn't stick. The same way you say, all right, this was the top thing that like messed up my site in Google searches for years. And I really wish I had known this before. Like you tell me that story and I go, oh, right, that person said that I needed to fix this, like this particular keyword thing. And that's all I'm going to retain, your story and that one tip. Like, so don't make it more complicated than it is.
I always like to say it's the elephant in the room conversation, right? What's
Yes.
it? What is the elephant in the room right now? What are people wanting to talk about, but they're a little bit
Mm-hmm.
frightened to talk about?
Yeah.
What's the and I call it the unsaid story. So
Mm.
I'll give you a good example of this, right?
Yeah.
In one of our brainstorming sessions last year, my media mastermind, Jennifer, I love celebrity hooks, right? And Jennifer Aniston, 2 days earlier, had released a story in a publication called The Cut, a New York publication. It was a big, in-depth interview about her time as an actress. And in one paragraph, she talked about how she was so sick and tired as a child-free woman, being harassed by the media, interestingly, and her fans too, about being harassed on when is she going to have a child with Brad Pitt? When is she going to have a child with Brad Pitt? And then there was one line in that paragraph which said, we were trying through fertility, and it was an incredibly lonely situation that we couldn't talk about. And when we were I had a fertility coach inside my program at that time. And 2 days later, we were brainstorming with a very prestigious wellness journalist, ideas for her business and how we can get her fertility work in the media. I remembered reading that article 2 days prior, and I said, hang on a minute. We talk about how lonely, like Jennifer Aniston said, it was really lonely being on a fertility journey. Why don't we talk about ways that you can alleviate that loneliness? Because that's, Meg, that's what you do as a fertility coach. You have your program, you have circles you set up for women going through the same journey. And as soon as I said that, the journalist eyes lit up and said, yeah, I want that story. Like that
Nice.
is an example of how you move a story
Mm-hmm.
on. A celebrity, and this is a celebrity, this is called newsjacking. A celebrity has said something, there's a hook in there, but no one's talking about that little problem, right? So many women are going through fertility, right? Everyone knows that it's a challenge for some women to have children, and it's a very lonely journey. So immediately we got Meg in the media. So the brainstorming happened on Thursday, and actually the journalist and her they had their interview on the Saturday, and it came out the following Tuesday in the UK. She was an American expert, but it came out in the British media on the Tuesday in the Metro, which is the widest um, free newspaper that's in free circulation. So it's not even it's online, but it's available to everyone, online and in print, and the distribution's huge. And it was an amazing article. And it
Yeah.
ended up being a quite a profile piece on her as an expert and how she helps women in their fertility journey. So it was about her business, but the hook was Jennifer Aniston. And the article actually featured a picture of Jennifer Aniston. So
Oh, wow.
that's an example of how you move the story on and how you help people in the world. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I learned a new term there, newsjacking. I'm going to find a way to use that. It's definitely going in the show notes. And there was something that you mentioned there too, like the elephant in the room. That's one thing that I work on with a lot of my earlier stage coaching clients who have it like we're all kind of raised to sweep unpleasantness, nastiness, discomfort, anxiety under the rug. Let's just pretend that it's not here. And I told people I don't like to do that because to me, that's like, let's picture there's an actual literal elephant in the room with us. Is somebody going to be comforted by me just pretending like it's not there? No, they're going to start wondering, am I crazy? Is Angie crazy? Like what is happening that nobody is talking about this elephant? There's an elephant, right? I'm not seeing I'm not smelling things. Am I having a stroke? Like people start to second guess themselves if you are ignoring all of that unpleasant stuff. So I tell like what came up and what I wrote down when you said that was like it's time to make friends with the elephant in the room and be like, oh yeah, that guy. Don't worry about that guy. I mean, he's friendly. He's over there in the corner with the hay. I'm gonna find a way. I don't know how he got in here. We'll find a way to get him out here later. Let's have the conversation over here. Oh, you want to like? pet the elephant. Cool. That's cool too. Like, let's talk about that.
I love that you say that, Angie. Make friends with the elephant in the room, because
Mm-hmm.
that's actually where the hidden story is, and
Mm-hmm.
that's how you kind of prick the ears of a journalist or an editor in uncovering the stories that their readers really want to hear. That's the
Oh,
barstool
yeah.
conversation. That's the locker room conversation.
That's what initially got us talking and deciding to record this podcast episode too, because we were talking about our respective elephants in the room. So we're in a mastermind together, a different one from Adela's media mastermind. And we were talking about kind of the head trash that comes around business failures, and particularly when you are dealing with partnerships, right? We talked about business grief and stuff like that. And that was the stuff that I wanted to keep hidden for a long time, because I'm proud of my accomplishments. I'm not proud of the fact that I had a failed partnership. Nobody likes breaking up, like, period. Even if it's the most amicable split under the sun, it's still uncomfortable and awkward and makes you feel like all of the dirty feelings.
Yes. Yes, 100%. And I think I really like this discussion, like this topic about business breakups, because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the story, and my head always goes into media and
Yeah.
TV shows and headlines is how my brain thinks, right? And I think TV shows and headlines, we always read about or watch films on romantic breakups, or
Uh-huh.
even these Netflix documentaries around band breakups, right? We love to hear about, see a musical band and then suddenly they break up. Why did they break up? What happened?
Mm-hmm.
But no one ever talks about business breakups.
I know that you were telling me a fascinating story about, and I don't know if you want to share this one or not, so feel free to redivert there. But you were telling me about somebody basically coming to live with you in your house
Yes.
to work on your
Yeah.
business. That's
Uh,
fantastic. I mean, it's not fantastic, but I'm fascinated.
Yeah, so this is classic Adela, right? So, but as I mentioned earlier, my first business was a fashion business. So I'd quit the corporate world, and I traveled through Asia. I was a bit of wanted to be Lara Croft and go through Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, and I purposely at month 4 ended up in Bali, where I knew there was a beautiful co-working space. It was actually the world's first co-working space. This was in 2016, where there was this term, like the digital nomad term was kind of blowing up, and lots of entrepreneurs and experts and coaches wanted to be location independent. So I was in this beautiful hub building quite a complicated fashion tech business. And I met this really inspiring American lady. And we just clicked so well. Like, we had a beautiful friendship. And I said to her, as my trip was, because I was living in Bali, kind of like an expat for 3.5 to 4 months. And in kind of month 3, I said, look, where are you traveling to next? And she said, oh, I'm not sure. And I said, hey, well, look, if you want to earn money and, work on your copyright. She was actually a copywriter. I get on very well with copywriters. She was a copywriter. She said, if you want to continue copywriting work, why don't you come to London with me, join me in London and do copywriting work on my business. Because at the time I had no idea about copywriting. I didn't even know what the term meant, but I knew I had to somehow write emails to my customers. And I said, why don't you come and move in with me? I have a house in, a nice part of London, and I have a spare room. And you can, I'll pay you, but you don't need to pay me any rent. So you can live in London on no rent, and still get paid for your work. And it was a really good deal. And she was just
Yeah.
like, yeah, like, I'll live in an expensive city and get paid.
Mm-hmm.
So she moved in with me and started to work on in my company. And at the time I had got some, investment, and I had a loan on the business. I suddenly started hiring people, and it was just. I'm still laughing. It was a bit of a disaster. I shouldn't have hired a really good friend to work with me. She was living in my attic, so it was a bit stressful because she was living and working with me. I had converted my living room, where we watch TV, into a co-working space with 5 desks. So there was nowhere for us to relax at the end of the night. We were just like working. And it killed the friendship. It killed the friendship. And I would never hire a friend again. I actually didn't learn my lesson. I ended up hiring my sister, which was even more of a disaster after
Oh my
that.
God.
I just didn't learn. I didn't learn from the first time. She stopped talking to me for a while.
Your sister or the friend? Oh
Both.
goodness.
Oh dear, both.
Oh no, that
Yeah.
happened with my former partner too. We started out as great friends, and then we were like talking one day about I was struggling with selling high ticket packages, and she was struggling with client management, and like I'm great at client management, and she's great at sales. So this just seems like, ooh, what serendipitous, what fortuitous timing. And what I wish I had done back then was talk a little bit more before getting all up in the excitement about what the expectations were, things like that. And none of this is to say that it was bad or anything like that. I love her. She's a brilliant woman. And we just had incompatible working styles and different goals that we didn't articulate up front. So after a while, we decided, this is just not working the way that we wanted it to. Can we just go back to being friends? And that's what I mean by like, even going back to the way it was before, you still got all this additional context of trying to build something together that didn't work. And now it's like really uncomfortable and awkward. And I just want to pretend there's no elephant in here. Could we please just go back and pretend it never happened? And it
Were you
doesn't work
able
that
to
way.
go back to being friends? Was that
Yeah.
possible? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's great. Yeah. That's really good. Because I think for me, it was challenging to be friends. I don't think I've spoken to her since. We still follow each other on Facebook. I've spoken to my sister. Clearly, we're blood, right? So we're united by blood. But with this friend, we didn't. We still follow each other on Facebook, and there were a few emails exchanged. But and she lives in a different country. But the friendship never really went back to what it was, and it's so it did feel like I was grieving that for a while, because when she left, I went through a process of grief for that friendship for probably about 6 weeks, I would say 6 to 8 weeks. She had really inspired me to do lots of things. I have a fear of not a fear. I can swim, and I can swim very well, but the idea of scuba diving sort of scares me a little bit. And she was just gun ho and loved scuba diving and told me, let's go scuba diving. And so we organized all these trips in Bali. And then before you knew it, I got my PADI master, my kind of, scuba diving qualification. And then I progressed to the advanced, and she helped me get on a scooter. She inspired my life in so many ways. So, to take more risks. And so I did grieve that business bestie breakup.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think we talk about this enough in the online industry.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I agree with you in that sense, that I think something in the relationship shifted, but it was very much a similar thing where she pushed me out of my comfort zone in the best possible way. I was deeply uncomfortable with self-promotion, with talking about my expertise. I always had this head trash around being a braggart and like making other people uncomfortable. And that's bullshit, guys. I mean, we all know who the braggart is in the room, and that is the most insecure person who needs everybody to know, I'm important, pay attention to me. Most of the time when you're talking about your accomplishments, people are going, oh, wow. Oh, that's cool. Like, talk to me more about that. So she challenged me in that way. And we made a lot of sales very fast together. And then after there was the awkwardness. Like, I'm not going to pretend like it was sunshine and roses, but we didn't talk for a while. And the relationship dynamic definitely changed. But she's a wonderful person, like I said. And oh God, showed me so much about what I can do and what my business potential could be. So I don't know. It's one of those steps along the journey that I think was necessary for my growth. And I don't necessarily believe in everything happens for a reason, because that seems kind of shitty to me. But I think everything happens with some sort of meaning attached, and it's designed to jumpstart you or get you moving in a new or adjusted direction. So I'm still grateful for the experience, even though it didn't go down the way that I had hoped.
Yes, I love that you've come out the other end with that sort of almost very wise philosophical perspective on the friendship shifting and the learning and the growth. Because I think sometimes
it didn't feel very wise at the time.
Yeah, exactly. When we're in the thick of it and we're crying our eyes out and wondering, why did we do this? Why did I convince someone to move in with me from Bali? And what a silly idea that was, and now I've lost a good friend, when we're sort of mourning the loss of a good friendship. yeah, it can be really hard to sort of look, when we're in it, right? So being able to just reflect back. And I think the thing also, Angie, that strikes me of what you said is about understanding that it's not just about our personal growth, but our business growth, right? Business is organic. It's a growth journey. You're not meant to have a perfect business from day one. That doesn't exist. That's just unattainable. As you grow on a personal level, your business is growing too. And so people and relationships, the energy is going to shift. Everything's going to shift. And so your business is an almost organic being, and it's going to evolve, and people are going to jump on the bus, to join on the journey, and then jump off the bus when it's not right for them. And we have to accept that. That's part of
Yes.
it.
That's such a beautiful analogy right there. Like nobody gets on the bus to ride the bus forever. Everybody's
Yes.
got a different stop. And if we
Yes.
stop taking it as personally as we tend to, especially personality businesses, like I have a coaching and expertise-based business. I know you do too. So sometimes it's really easy to get in your head if somebody goes, I'm done working with you, or this is not right for me, or something like that. Well, do you hate me? Why don't you want to work with me? Especially if business gets slow. Gosh, I know so many people who have been in that. It's hard not to take it personally, but it's not personal. They're just getting off at their stop. Cool. I'm going to
Yeah.
drop you off there. Maybe I'll swing back around and you'll get back on. It's cool.
Yeah. And the reasons for them getting off at a stop might be nothing to do with your business, but might be something happening on in their personal life. Their husband or their partner may have lost their jobs, and suddenly they need to earn, a more regular salary, and therefore they've got to jump the bus, and that's okay. So I think sometimes as entrepreneurs and experts, we can end up being a bit too attached to thinking in a very rigid way rather than thinking in a very critical thinking way, and being sort of open and realizing that our business is organic. It's growing at this, along with us. And we've got to learn, and we've got to acknowledge that and accept that.
Well, and I think sometimes, especially like in this hyper-capitalist society that we've got, it's really tempting to think, okay, I'm running into obstacles, double down, persist, muscle through. Sometimes resistance is being thrown up because that's not the path. And there's something easier for you. And that kind of goes back to, ties together so beautifully what we were talking about with overthinking media pitches at the beginning and thinking you've got to be the expert up here. Sometimes if you just let it be easy and let that bus circle back around and let people get on and get off as they see fit, you keep doing your work, you keep focusing on your business and your personal growth. Everything, well, I'm not going to say everything will work out the way you want it to, but everything will work out the way that it needs to.
Yes, 100%. And I think the most, it's funny because you mentioned, Angie, about, sometimes there's almost, and I think you may have been alluding to this kind of bro marketing of come on, more.
I call it douche bro marketing.
Douche bro marketing. When you look at douche bro, they're not douche, but you look at like world famous, business leaders and entrepreneurs, we often think they are like more. But actually, when you end up meeting people and you end up really analyzing what they're like as characters, so we'll take a classic male entrepreneur, right? Richard Branson. He's actually very interesting in that he leads with curiosity and inquisitiveness, and he's always trying to learn. And I think if there's one thing, people take away today is just to always see yourself as a student, right? Because if you always see yourself as a student, you're open to new ideas, you're open to curiosity and learning. And that actually ends up improving your knowledge base because you're going to surround yourself with people who can teach you. But you yourself, even if you're at the expert level, when you talk to experts, they will always say, actually, I'm working on this, or I'm learning this. And it's never about an ego. They're never leading with their ego. They're leading with, what can I learn now? What can I do better? How can I improve? And I think there's something in that about leading with curiosity.
Oh, absolutely.
And a willingness to learn and be open. And I think if you come with that value, you'll end up being more resilient to your business, throwing you those lessons when the bus hits the blockade or the bus is like overturned and everyone's got to work out how to sort themselves out in that moment, that disastrous moment,
Mm-hmm. What a wonderful, well, not the bus accident, but a wonderful high note to end on, that like resilience is key. Beware of the person who pretends or truly believes that they know everything.
Yes.
Growth is the name of the game, and you are the magic. That's what people want to hear from you, your clients, journalists, the media. We want to hear your story, even if it's an awkward elephant in the room. Whoo, we've come full circle about like 5 times, but I love it. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise and your insight with us. Please tell us a little bit more about how we can learn about you and your business and the masterminds.
Thank you so much, Angie. What a beautiful conversation. I absolutely loved it. I love how we've come full circle. So, yes, if you are listening today and you're thinking, actually, you know what? I do want to play bigger. How do I get started with media? Is it as intimidating as people make it out to be? Firstly, no, it isn't. I have a little free gift for you. You can go to pitchtopress.com and download a free little gift called 10 Steps to Get into the Media. And it's the 10 steps I used to pitch myself into the media with a lot of success, including Harvard Business Review. So feel free to go and download that lovely gift, pitchtopress.com. You can also follow me on Instagram. I always love getting DMs. And I would absolutely love, if you've been listening today and you're keen and you're thinking, actually, you know what, I really took something away from this, and tell me what your aha moment was and send me a DM. At my Instagram is Adela _Hussain. So it's ADELA _Hussain, HUSSAIN. Yeah, I couldn't get Adela.Hussain.
Oh,
so that's
man.
why it's Adela _Hussain, which makes it more complicated. But I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what your aha moment was from this beautiful recording today. Thank you.
Well, the good news is I'm going to make it easy with clickable links in the show notes so that they can just click and talk directly to Adela. Thank you so much again for being an amazing guest, for being an amazing friend and mastermind compatriot, helping me grow my own business. And we're going to have to do a follow-up at some points.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure.
That's all for now. If you want to keep that kick-ass energy high, please take a minute to share this episode with someone that might need a high-octane dose of "you can do it." Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the Permission to Kick-Ass podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you stream your podcasts. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and I'm here rooting for you. Thanks for listening, and let's go kick some ass.